without further ado, I'm happy to introduce Paul Israel, our Executive Director, to say a few words.
Thanks, Rachel. Really looking forward to today's webinar, and thanks again to AIIA for their partnership. So as Rachel mentioned, the Chamber is all about helping Australian corporations accessing the Israeli ecosystem. We do that through our technology scouting, webinars, like today, trade missions and delegations, which we're excited about returning in 2022. Many people call Israel the startup nation, but we've outgrown that title, and we now have entrepreneurs that aren't just looking for the quick exit anymore, but rather build companies of significance on a global scale, employing hundreds and in some cases, thousands of people. Our two companies presenting today, MNDY and Powtoon, are great examples of this. It is estimated that around 10% of the world's unicorns are in Israel. That is privately held companies valued at $1 billion US and more. We're talking about approximately 80 Israeli unicorns, all of whom are high-tech related. We're seeing this in actual investments. Thus far in 2021, there have been well over 114 funding rounds in excess of $50 million each, compared with 47 in 2020 and 39 in 2019. In the first 3 quarters of this year, we've already seen 53 deals of $100 million and above, which is 51% of the total amount raised in the Israeli high-tech sector. This trend has spilled over into the public markets. So when MNDY listed on the NASDAQ in June, there were a number of other Israeli IPOs with a total combined valuation of over $35 billion US, all in 1 month. So in summary, Israel still has an abundance of startups, blended with mid-sized companies, NASDAQ-listed entities, unicorns, and not to mention 400 plus multinationals with global R&D centers, which leads to a diverse, evolving industry that has global appeal. Thanks, Rachel. Back to you.
Thank you, Paul. With this webinar, we are delighted to partner with AIIA, the Australian Information Industry Association, Australia's peak representative body and advocacy group representing the depth and breadth of Australia's innovation technology companies and 750,000 plus workforce across the Australian technology sector. We have Ron Gauci, CEO, here today, and we'll be grateful if you could share a few words of introduction. Over to you, Ron.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel, and also thanks, Paul, and to the broader Israel-Australia Chamber of Commerce community. The opportunities that a digitalised economy creates are well and truly evident globally, but most notably in Israel. The data that Paul just read out is a perfect example of the Israeli leadership in this space. The AIIA is obviously delighted to support the Israel-Australia Chamber of Commerce, not only for this event, but just as importantly, it's an important opportunity for Australian companies who are on this webinar to see and hear what great looks like. We need relationships like this to help us navigate through what it means to leverage what a digital world looks like. The benefits derived from a digital workplace are enormous, and today's event is an important step in that journey. As CEO of the AIIA, as Rachel said, our members are made up of the many organisations in the ICT industry in Australia, both in size from one person to multinationals, and the range of solutions that will enable digitisation in this country. I look forward to the many other opportunities that we can explore together with the Israel-Australian Chamber of Commerce to share information, host the trade delegations to Israel, and collaborate on more events like these. Today is about collaboration, not just in title, but in action. And I know you'll get much more from this session by being part of it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. In July 2019, we had the honour of hosting a very exciting and senior delegation from Bunnings. And when we started to put this webinar together, we wanted to look for a person and a company that could really hold it all together, someone who knows firsthand just how important visual collaboration is and can be for any digital or distributed workplace. We had to look no further than Irit Harris, who is the head of the Innovation Lab at Bunnings. Collaboration at its core is about solving unmet needs and creating new value, which is the exact mandate of the vision of the Innovation Lab. Irit was thrown into this challenge after 13 years at ANZ and NAB in strategy, innovation, customer experience, and transformation roles. She joined the Bunnings team in February 2020, which was moments really before the world changed and the rules of workplace collaboration, creativity, and productivity were turned on its head. As we all would know, Bunnings really stepped up to the challenges thrown by the COVID-19 pandemic in a big way. And we are privileged that Irit agreed to be part of the webinar today and to moderate our discussion. Irit, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and I am so pleased to be moderating this wonderful panel. As many of you are aware, at Bunnings we look after everything from the front gate to the back fence, and we help Australians and New Zealanders achieve their DIY dreams. As COVID hit, and as Rachel said, I'd been in the business for around 5 weeks, and the needs for our homes radically shifted. It became the place that we did everything, you know, eat, sleep, work out, and therefore the needs for our home accelerated. We needed new things like a home office, gym equipment, and for some people, pets. And the way that we wanted to receive these things also changed. Bunnings, as Rachel mentioned, really adapted to these changes. And as a business, we became hyper-focused on customer and team safety at its core. And we implemented a number of innovations. So Drive and Collect was one that enabled customers to get what they needed from Bunnings in a contactless way. We instituted Bunnings Marketplace so that you could actually get your home office from Bunnings. And for in-store, we rolled out something called the Bunnings Product Finder that allows you to plan ahead, create a list, navigate that list in store through an interactive map, and then as you check out, actually get a digital receipt through the single app. For us to do all of these things, we really needed visual collaboration tools to support us in solving these very, very unique and complex problems. And very importantly, make decisions really fast in a remote environment. So we needed tools to help us, you know, get information from our leaders in real time. And so we use things like Workplace for live Q&A. We needed, you know, a way to brainstorm and ideate ideas, like imagine a virtual whiteboard. We needed ways to manage our backlogs and our projects. And for our digital tools, we also needed ways to actually create digital prototypes that we could test and learn with our customers in a virtual environment. We also needed ways to onboard new team members. In fact, my team onboarded 2/3 of our team over the last 18 months. And we needed to find new ways to really, you know, connect and communicate with each other. I personally call this, you know, formalizing the informal, because that casual walk past someone's desk, you know, or that chat in the kitchen or the hangout at the local cafe isn't possible in, you know, a COVID world. And so we actually need to schedule these things in. And the importance of doing these things enables us to, you know, ensure our team's well-being, build relationships, and also be an even more productive workforce. And so with this in mind, I am really pleased to introduce our 2 companies for this virtual collaboration webinar, Powtoon and Monday.com. Kicking it off with Monday.com. Monday.com is a work operating system where organisations of any size can create tools and processes they need to manage every aspect of their work. By combining building blocks like apps, automations, and integrations, teams can build or customise their workflows. Representing Monday.com, I would like to introduce their regional lead for Australia and New Zealand, Dean Swan. Over to you, Dean.
Thanks, Irit, and good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here with you all. I'm just going to change my Zoom view so I can make sure we're getting that. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I think just in the short space of time that we've got, I would like to further introduce Monday.com as a company and what we do for those of you that aren't familiar with Monday. And then I'm going to share 2 stories of how the Israeli government used visual collaboration to respond to the COVID-19 crisis in a very fast time frame, and some great innovations that came out of that. So with that, let me just find the PowerPoint here, and we'll do a screen share. And I'll go into presenter mode. Irit, can you see that okay?
Good for me.
Okay,
Yeah,
excellent. I assume it's good for everyone. Thank you. Right, so Monday.com is one of the fastest growing SaaS companies. We launched in 2014, and we've experienced hyper growth as a company since then. As I said, one of the fastest growing SaaS companies in the world today. We're headquartered in Tel Aviv, and we've now got more than 8 offices around the world. Sydney, in fact, was our second international location that we launched last year in March, right in the midst of COVID-19. And that was with 1 employee being myself. We now have over 70 roles in Australia, and now looking for office space for 200 to 300 people that will be supporting our efforts and our customers in the region. Yeah, so it's been significant growth for us as an organization. And Australia is a very significant market for Monday.com. It's our 3rd largest market. We've got over 12,000 customers, and teams that use Monday.com's visual work operating system to plan, track, and run their projects, their processes, and just everyday work with ease. And I think why we've been so successful as a company is, first of all, the nature of work has changed quite dramatically. Organizations have had to collaborate remotely, and as well, organizations looking to do things in a very rapid, agile way, and that's where Mondays come in. We've got companies in Australia like Coles, Vodafone, Toyota that use Monday.com for agile planning and delivery. We've got leading tech companies like Canva, customers like News Limited, Destination New South Wales, and Kmart that use Monday.com for their marketing campaign planning, for their creative asset management, intaking and ingesting creative requests, and managing all of the campaigns and the work that they're doing. Organizations like University of South Australia, as well as Domino's and many others that will use Monday within their IT teams to manage that digital transformation, to manage their projects and their IT operations. So across a wide variety of industries and organizations of all different sizes are using Monday as that visual collaboration tool in many ways. Now, our mission as a company is really to empower teams to do their best work and to be their best. And the 2 examples I'm going to share today, and before I jump into that, in fact, just obviously we're having to innovate really quickly and on the fly, and it was great hearing you, Irit, just talk about some of the rapid innovations that Bunnings brought in. But many organizations have been in a similar situation through the COVID, where responding extremely fast in this changing environment is something that they've had to do, but in a more challenging environment, in an environment where your entire teams are working remotely. We're spending more time in calls and meetings. Synchronization is a challenge. Transparency is something that we struggle with. Communications is something that we struggle with. As you said, you don't have those incidental opportunities to chat by the water cooler. Everything is either through video calls or Slack or email. So I think people are becoming overwhelmed with that. And as a result, we're experiencing the lowest levels of employee engagement. There's silos of information and data. So with that backdrop, let me share 2 stories of innovation. And I'd say one is a top-down innovation and the other one is a bottoms-up. The top-down was with the National COVID-19 Control Center that the Israeli government established in response to the COVID-19 crisis. That brought together 4 civilian and military government agencies. It was the Israeli Defense Force, the Secret Service, the Prime Minister's Office, and the Department of Health that came together and had to work also across 14 different hospitals in managing the response to the COVID crisis. Now, the big challenge that they faced was that they had to address this challenge in rapid time, but coming together for the first time, they had no common systems or centralized platforms to coordinate, to communicate, and just really to manage their efforts in an extremely difficult environment. They were doing things like if you were trying to get the COVID lab test results from all of the different hospitals, they were relying on the hospitals to fill out spreadsheets, or they were calling the hospitals and they couldn't get a hold of people because they were busy with the patients. And so they were really struggling with that real-time insight. And as soon as they got the information, it was out of date, right? So they used Monday, and they implemented Monday just to capture all of that information. And that flowed right up to the Prime Minister's office, where they had real-time insight in terms of the dashboards around what was the current state of COVID, where were they seeing the trends, where were the hospitals struggling with the capacity. At the same time, they had to procure billions of dollars worth of supplies and treatments, and each agency had its own different procurement process and systems and so on. So you can imagine it's incredibly challenging to address the situation, and time was running out. They worked with an advisory firm, and an advisory firm told them that it would take months to actually build out a system that was going to enable them to work efficiently in the way that they wanted to. And I think out of desperation or necessity, someone in one of the government departments knew our CEO and co-founder, Roy Iman, and called up Roy and said, look, there must be something that Monday can do here. And we sent a team down, those three gentlemen in the bottom right-hand photo there with their masks on, spent a day in the control center, and within a single day, we set up Monday.com and our work operating system to manage and coordinate the effort of the COVID-19 control center. Subsequently, they've procured billions of dollars worth of suppliers with Monday in terms of being able to interact with suppliers. They've taken a procurement process that, in their own words, would take days or weeks, and they've been able to whittle that down into hours. Again, if you think about planning and coordinating your work, I'll draw your attention to the little photo on the bottom left-hand side there. Now, in that office, you'll notice a whole lot of colorful sticky notes. And teams before COVID, if they were doing agile projects, they would have these notes where they were moving things along on Kanban and running their stand-ups. You couldn't do that when everyone's working remotely. So they moved to a digital workplace, which was Monday, so they could manage their sprints in a digital form that enabled the teams in the physical location as well as dispersed outside to be able to coordinate their efforts with one another, prioritize their sprint backlogs, and prioritize what they needed to get done within a 14-hour day. What was the thing that we needed to work on that was going to have the most impact? So it was a very successful project, and it's amazing that Monday, within a single day, was able to pull this together for the agency. An agency had never worked together before and actually had such a significant impact in terms of their visibility, the transparency, and the coordinated effort. So that was the top-down innovation and using visual collaboration. If I look at the bottoms up, and this is a story of how doctors and developers united during the crisis. So one of the hospitals, the Asuta Ashdod hospital, which is one of the newer hospitals in Israel, and clearly is quite innovative. Their head of innovation, Dr. Tel Patalon, saw that there was an opportunity to address the emerging COVID-19 challenges by using technology and bringing together technology partners, entrepreneurs, and clinicians to help address these challenges. These were challenges she saw at the time, which when you read the list, we know that a lot of these challenges were quite apparent during COVID: running out of ventilators, overburdening of hospitals, infection of medical staff while treating patients, communication between families and critical ill patients. So Tel approached the Ground Forces Innovation Lab of the Israeli Defense Force, as well as a technology company called Raphael and Amazon Web Services. And they brainstormed how could they go ahead and tackle some of these challenges. And what they came up with was what they called the COVID-19 sprint. And that sprint was born on the 19th of March, 2020. And they brought together 200 of their best engineers, product managers, and project managers. as well as over 100 doctors, nurses, and clinicians to work together to come up with solutions to these particular challenges and to deliver that in record time, so within 3 weeks. Here's the challenge. When you do a hackathon or a sprint, these sorts of initiatives, you can normally do them, and they normally are done in person. You know, people get together and they spend long hours together hacking through this and developing these solutions. That wasn't possible. This had to be done entirely remotely and entirely online, and across, again, people that had all these different systems. And they approached Monday and then leveraged Monday to plan sort of that agile approach and to manage that entire sprint effort. And there's an example of a board here that the team set up, again, for visual collaboration and communication, where the engineers were able to interact with the doctors and the nurses and the clinicians in terms of asking questions, understanding those problems in more detail, and then being able to track what challenge did it relate to, was the question answered, and what was that answer, and being able to work asynchronously as well, because you'd imagine the clinicians weren't readily available if you had a question. So it was with great success. Again, they used the Monday boards to contextualize their sprints, to help them with their prioritization and their planning, understand who was owning what, how much effort it was going to take, when it was going to be delivered. But a couple of examples of the solutions that were delivered. Imagine now, I mean, there were just so many patients and there wasn't enough time for the staff to individually call and update the families, right? And the medical staff also needed a way to keep families of patients in intensive care up to date. And they developed a system called ICU. Now, a patient in intensive care was typically connected to a ventilator. They were too weak or fragile to hold a tablet up. And so what they did was they developed this tablet on a stand that could be controlled outside of the room by the clinicians. And that provided a way for families to interact with these critical ill patients. And typically, unfortunately, it was their loved ones that were sort of at that last moments, and it gave them an opportunity to interact. It also gave them an opportunity for the clinicians to provide the families with up-to-date information and regular updates on their loved one's condition. Some of the other innovations that came out of that was, they were able to detect symptoms from a distance, or a two-piece disposable protective suit. And if I have a look at the feedback from Doris, who was the sprint manager and the head of Ground Forces Innovation Lab, she said it was amazing what these strangers, these people that came together for the very first time.
Sorry to interrupt you. You've got about 1 minute left.
Okay, no worries. But they were able to establish and provide solutions in 1.5 months that sometimes would take 15 months worth of work. So I'd say, it's not just unique to the Israeli government and people responding to COVID, but we're seeing this with businesses and all sorts of organizations needing to overcome that friction. And I'd say that, again, in summary, is the power of teams coming together to be able to innovate, to be able to collaborate in a way that sort of breaks the norms and the systems that they normally would work through. And it's great to be able to share a little bit about what Monday's done in Australia, as well as for these organizations. Thank you. Back to you, Irit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dean, for that presentation. I took away a lot from that, and I particularly loved how Monday.com was used by the National COVID-19 Control Centre to coordinate a mission and also communicate results across 4 agencies, all within sort of a single day, and the testament to sort of Israel's success as part of, the COVID response is really, a wonderful testament. So well done to sort of you and Monday on that, Monday.com. I'm now very pleased to take the opportunity to introduce our second company, Powtoon. Built for individuals, teams, institutions, and enterprises, Powtoon is the all-in-one visual communication platform that makes videos and visual content enjoyable to create, simple to manage, and quick to distribute. Representing Powtoon, I'd like to introduce you all to Adam Swisser, who looks after strategic partnerships. Over to you, Adam.
Hey, thanks very much. I'm just going to get the share screen going here and open up Powtoon. Okay, good stuff. So the Great Resignation, remote onboarding, what happened to those water cooler moments, what's happening with organizational culture and where's it heading, remote job skipping, and obviously ineffective communication are all costing organizations millions of dollars a year. And these are some of the common challenges that have already been mentioned today and that I'm sure a lot of us are very familiar with. My name is Adam, and I am head of partnerships at Powtoon. It's really great to meet everybody, especially over in Australia. I'm from London originally, but currently based out of Powtoon's Tel Aviv office. And today I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction as to Powtoon, the company. We'll talk a bit about workplace challenges that we're seeing from our customers and how those customers and companies are addressing these challenges. And obviously we'll also do a little bit of a dive into how clients are using creativity and collaboration, specifically when it comes to video and dynamic presentations. So a little bit about Powtoon. Powtoon have been around since 2011. Our platform has evolved through a wealth of insights thanks to our loyal customers. Today we have over 40 million users, many of those on our enterprise platform that we launched a couple of years ago. So companies like Accenture and SAP and Airbus, all kind of playing a role in helping us get insights as to what those companies need when it comes to creating, managing, and distributing all different types of visual content. So when I say visual content, I'm referring to things that range from animation explainer videos that you can build out in our platform. It may be whiteboard tutorials, dynamic presentations, screen and web camera recordings for quick internal comms updates. And you can also bring in PowerPoints and convert those into exciting and engaging videos. You can manage those projects in our platform and collaborate in teams to build out the different projects and assets that you might be working on as an organization. And then you can distribute those, whether it's through our integrations with comms platforms such as Microsoft Teams or different learning management systems that are frequently used by L&D and HR teams managing the organization from a workforce perspective. You could also download your assets through MP4s or create exciting email GIFs. And as we say at Powtoon, if you can vision it, you can Powtoon it. I think really at the core of what we're doing at Powtoon though, is trying to move businesses from the sort of legacy systems, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word docs, PDFs, over to the way that individuals and consumers are used to consuming and even creating content in their personal lives. We're all familiar with Netflix binge watching, YouTube and the creator economy, and obviously with the advent of platforms like TikTok, the popularity when it comes to becoming a creator and experiencing visual as the most effective way to engage yourself and, as we believe, your organization. So Powtoon removes a lot of the friction and the barriers typically associated with creating video and dynamic content, and we make it super simple. We're often described as the equivalent of Wix.com for video. Obviously in Australia, you may be more familiar with the kind of the Canva for video, if you like. So let's look a bit deeper at some of these challenges really that are coming out of some of the organizations that we serve and how visual communication and video is helping to solve some of those. So these range from, and some of these were touched upon earlier, thank you, employee onboarding challenges, you know, that kind of lonely feeling of being onboarded as an employee, sitting in your bedroom, you know, waiting for the next onboarding event to take place, so to speak, and then span across to other challenges of low engagement levels or disengagement levels at times, especially in countries such as Australia that have been having lockdowns even up until very recently. You know, the challenges that that brings are, you know, far and few, and obviously have an immense impact on employees sitting at home. Poor training and knowledge gaps in the organization, It's a very big challenge that we're helping to address, especially when it comes to areas of peer-to-peer learning and engaging the workforce to becoming their own storytellers at all levels of the organization. Ineffective selling strategies, now that your prospects are no longer sitting at a desk with an extension line, but maybe working from home and hard to get hold of. How are you going to capture their attention? And we believe that video is the best way to go about doing that. And another area that's really quite up and coming, but growing all the time from our use cases and through our customers, is the area of knowledge retention. How are companies retaining knowledge with so many employees either moving roles in companies or even leaving organizations in a short period of time, dare I say? What are organizations doing to capture the knowledge that those employees have accrued during their time in the company and transferring that knowledge over to new employees that are now being recruited and need to catch up to speed remotely and quickly? So some of these I've touched on when it comes to how video plays its part in solving, a piece of this puzzle. But just to elaborate slightly further, when you take employee onboarding, for example, we're seeing customers give their new employees a chance to create a simple introduction video that says who they are, what their background is, expresses a little bit of personability into their lives and what they enjoy doing, what their hobbies are, and what they'll be doing in their new role at the company. And then sharing those videos on learning management software platforms or internal comm systems in Teams, so that your colleagues can already get a real sense for who you are. And it's a great way of breaking the ice. And this has been adopted by many of our customers, some of them very large enterprise companies, and seems to be yielding great results when it comes to adding engagement, and obviously when it comes to creating a more collaborative effect, albeit in a remote and hybrid work environment. I mentioned before, problems with training and knowledge gaps in the organization, and countless organizations are using Powtoon to build effective training materials, from upskilling to IT announcements. And just to touch briefly on ineffective selling strategies, we have companies like top tier consultancy firms that are using video as a new way to actually interact with prospects, engage their customers on roadmaps and storytelling journeys, as opposed to just sort of one pages, so to speak, or static documents as might be used more traditionally. So with that, you might be wondering, okay, I get the idea and the challenges associated when it comes to creating more engagement, either with the workforce or with customers, but what are all these videos being created? So I've put together a list of some of the more popular ones, and they really do span from department to department. And it could range from internal communications, company announcements and team reviews, to training and peer-to-peer knowledge, giving employees the chance to create and share insights with their teams of learnings and findings that they are accruing on the job. That's not just a top-down approach anymore, but really becoming more of an integrated and collaborative process. HR with recruitment videos for LinkedIn sharing and onboarding videos for new hires. And then of course, we have sales demo content, marketing, social media content, and animated emails that they're using to engage with customers. And dare I say it, even IT using Powtoon all the time to create more effective videos for compliance training and breaking down complicated topics into simplified, engaging videos. I wanted to share with you some examples of how Powtoon are making this process much more simple. And some of the ways we do that is through our branded templates. So we have libraries of templates that you can literally come in and just customize on the fly. We can also create branded templates for your companies and lock those. And integrating our platform into communication tools like Microsoft Teams, or in the learning and development environment with learning management systems, is becoming a popular way to streamline this procedure of making content and delivering that content in a seamless fashion. So with that, let's look at a few examples of the different styles being created by customers to engage their workforces. Just on a very basic level, on the left here, you can see a classic talking head uploaded video by Facebook into the Powtoon platform, and then really building out that messaging with additional layers of animation. I haven't shared the sound and music playing in the background of this particular video, but this was put together through using our stock footage libraries. So in Powtoon, you have unlimited videos of pre-recorded stock video scenes, images, sound effects, and music, and then building out your story with added layers of mixed visual media. Other companies like to take a more animated approach to things. So for example, Amazon, sharing their leadership principles, building out animated characters using Powtoon's character builder, and branding those characters and sharing those leadership principles in a short and engaging video with their management team. I think earlier, Dean from Monday.com mentioned whiteboards, and whilst there are whiteboard sharing tools, IT departments love to use our whiteboard scenes to create and break down complicated topics about cybersecurity and sharing those in simple animation whiteboard videos across the organization. But it's not all animation. We do have a more corporate contemporary feel. And here's an example of a branded template that Powtoon use when reaching out to sales prospects. So you can brand templates, lock those, and then share them with members of the team so that they can quickly unlock assets and recreate videos in minutes and share them for their specific use cases. And then finally, I also wanted to share with you some examples of the characters you can build out using our character builder. Here from Deloitte, using their branded colors, you can create literal characters of people in the organization, design their facial structures and features to look very similar to their real selves, and then automatically populate them in different poses and bring them into video projects that you're making in the organization. Here, another example from Otis, requiring slightly more when it comes to props and the actual materials that those characters need to be wearing. And PwC, very notorious for their autumn colors, using Powtoon to create branded scenes and replicate those scenes in different use cases across different departments of their organization. So I recognize that we're pressed for time today, but we do have a wealth of feedback from our customers, and I would love to share more insights and a deeper dive on Powtoon with anyone who wanted to pick this up with me personally. So I extend all of my contact details and look forward to any questions that come my way today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Adam. That was fantastic. I again took away a lot of takeaways from that presentation. Perhaps my main one was the power of video when it comes to connecting and communicating with team members in a really collaborative and creative way. So thanks so much for sharing. We're going to now shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to take a moment to ask Adam and Dean a number of questions, and if the time permits, I'll open the floor to live Q&A. So please do embed your questions in the chat function as well. Now I'm going to kick it off with Dean. Dean, I'm really keen to understand, as an organisation that uses Agile, why do you believe it's so important for organisations that do use Agile to visualise their work?
Yeah, I think if you look at Agile, it's definitely taking over the last couple of years. Organisations of all different sizes are scaling Agile across the organisation. It's not just the domain and way of working for software developers and engineers. It's if you look at ANZ Bank, they deploy that across thousands of employees. I spoke to a very large not-for-profit the other day, probably about 2 weeks ago. They're rolling out Agile at scale, and everyone in between, right? But I think the biggest challenge is when I speak to people about it, and I spoke to the former CIO of Bankwest last week, and they had a very successful Agile transformation. But the developers are using tools like Jira, but it's everyone else around that where the work is chaotic, and they are trying to manage that through spreadsheets. And it wasn't just unique to them. It was a similar situation. We were working with Coles, hundreds of strategic initiatives, but, using spreadsheets and then PowerPoint to present those that progress up to the execs. And I think that's why the visualization of Agile is so important. And obviously, this is where we stepped in to be able to show from the executive view, connected into Jira, the work where you're driving the strategy right through down to the technical execution. And organizations across the board want that visibility, they want that transparency, they want to understand how these things are progressing, especially with these projects that have got very compressed timelines that they're needing to deliver on.
Thanks so much, Dean. And I can see the value in Monday.com during sort of the COVID crisis, where decisions needed to be made incredibly fast and sort of leveraging a number of different teams collaboratively. So thanks for that response. Adam, one for you now. Thanks so much in your presentation for covering a number of use cases for video and video creation in the corporate setting. I'm really keen to understand, when a company or an individual or an organisation comes to you, what is the problem that they're sort of wanting you to help them solve?
Yeah, so great question. And, a lot of the time it depends on which department we're engaging with. We do see a lot of inbound interest from learning and development teams and HR departments, especially around areas of onboarding new employees and now actually offboarding employees. And that might not even mean employees who are just leaving organizations, younger generations, sort of job hopping, but also people in the organization that are just shifting roles. So we have like kind of an offboarding module at Powtoon, which is helping companies to basically ensure that their employees are creating a short series of bite-sized videos before they either change roles or even leave the organization, and just leaving behind a trail or an archive that can be picked up by the next person who's onboarded in order to really integrate and understand, what projects have been left open, which items were worked on maybe that still are in development, projects that have been closed that were successful, projects that weren't successful. This whole area of kind of knowledge transformation becoming very, very important. And I did forget to mention earlier that we have a specific guide all built around these use cases. So perhaps I'll just drop a link to that guide in the chat of some sort for sharing.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much, Adam. Now, Dean, one for you that I'm going to share in two parts. So part number one is, as we are in, I guess, definitely in Victoria, we're moving towards sort of a hybrid working environment. How do you believe that sort of hybrid working environments and distributed teams has changed how organisations approach Agile at scale? That's sort of part one. And I guess part two, with organisations, I guess, working in that sort of way, how important do you believe, and how do you think companies maintain visibility and transparency of the work being done?
Yeah, and I would say it's not just restricted to Agile. I think just anything where teams have planned out work, shared in that photo where in the control center you had a team that had sticky notes all over the office door with action items, to-dos, and similarly, I had a mate of mine who's a senior exec at a large bank, and in his office he's got all of his sticky notes that he's moving along in terms of the day's tasks. Spoke to another organisation, a large government organisation in Queensland, and they had 200 plus sticky notes on their windows managing these large transformation projects. And then within a day, people have been shifted into working from home. So all of that knowledge, all of that IP is sitting in the office on sticky notes, right? So again, that's, I think that's why moving to Agile at scale or moving to project management, the remote work has brought people into needing to digitize that. I think it's very startup-like and scrappy, where you move things along on your boards on sticky notes or in a meeting room. But the forcing function with COVID has meant that we had to digitize that. Again, that visibility and that transparency, it has created a bit of an unequal playing field. So even now, as we go into remote work, you're going to have people in the office and you're going to have people still working from home. And that's a big challenge, because how do you create that parity across your teams? And I think this is, again, where that visibility and that transparency comes in, when you have platforms that digitize that and it's accessible for everyone. And again, talking about that parity, our teams are distributed. You know, I work with teams that are based in New York and based in Tel Aviv. We have to work asynchronously, because you know, working remotely has created this extremely long work day. So you get up early in the morning and I'm engaging with colleagues in New York, and then late at night with folks in Tel Aviv. It's not sustainable, right? So we have to shift to asynchronous work. And again, I think that's you know, that's that shift to these visual platforms where people can come in, they can see where things are up to. They don't need a meeting to have an update about the status of things. It's there, and they can just get on with their work.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dean. And I can definitely empathise, perhaps not with a global workforce, but with team in WA, in Sydney, in Victoria, in South Australia, the need, some people in person, some people sort of virtual, the need to be able to leverage tools and visual collaboration software to support, you know, ensuring projects run efficiently and effectively. So thank you very much for that response. Adam, last one for you before we open the floor to live Q&A. So just reminding everyone to please post their questions in the chat. What do you believe the future has in store when it comes to video collaboration and the new world of work?
Yeah, we think about this a lot at Powtoon, obviously, you know, trying to predict where things are heading. And I think that it's a mixture between improving the way we can kind of embrace synchronous collaboration, even from home, whilst at the same time embracing asynchronous collaboration. And if we can, you know, work to improve the way that we adopt synchronous experiences whilst we're working remotely, that potentially could be where the future's heading for visual. And there's obviously a lot of tech that's coming out in this area. I mean, there are companies like Verbella, for example, that are creating, you know, virtual offices, you know, so offices that you plug into virtually that look exactly like the office you were working at before the pandemic, obviously. Facebook investing heavily, obviously, in VR tools, you know, and trying to recreate, you know, avatars of employees so that we can feel more connected and feel more engaged, even when we're working from home. So I think that it's going to be a mix of those two worlds, the synchronous and the asynchronous, and trying to improve the synchronous experience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I note that, you know, last week Facebook came out renaming themselves Meta. And so Metaverse, no doubt, will be sort of, you know, a hot word for the upcoming sort of year or years. So whilst I wait for sort of questions in the chat, perhaps a question that I'll ask both of you, and I'll kick it off sort of with Dean first, is what makes the Australian market an interesting and strategic place for Monday.com and also for Powtoon subsequently? And from your experience, you know, how's it been working in Australia, and what's next for you, particularly sort of thinking about, you know, Australia and our requirements here? With you,
yeah, look, I think for Monday, it's been an interesting market because we just had such a strong uptake of Monday.com with even before we had a physical presence here, right? So when we opened up the business here last year in March, we already had 7,000 customers. So yeah, people had really embraced Monday. I think for us, you know, next as a team is certainly we're establishing this region as a base for us in terms of the expansion into the rest of Asia. We've hired our first employees in Japan, and we're doing other things, so it's very interesting in that regard. And just again, I think the things that make Australia an interesting market for most technology companies is sort of high and early adoption of technologies, of cloud technologies and everything else. And again, it's a very mature, large market. I think Australia punches well above its weight in terms of the adoption of technology. So yeah, there's things that we're doing in Australia that's innovation for Monday globally, which we're quite excited about, and we get to bring that back into our organisation. And it's definitely early days for us, right? There's a lot of exciting things happening.
Thanks so much, Dean. And now over to you, Adam, to answer the same question on behalf of Powtoon.
Yeah, so, you know, Powtoon haven't opened an Australia office yet, I say. But I think that, you know, we're an online SaaS platform, and we obviously have seen the success with, you know, other forms of creativity coming from Australia, homeborn companies like Canva. And we recognize that we're a market leader in the video space of that segment. So for us, just seeing the natural kind of organic flow of customers that we've had from Australia in corporate, but also with the education world there as well, amongst the universities, is kind of, it's forced it to our attention essentially, and we need to give Australia a closer look, hence our relationship here with the IACC, and also with some other strategic partners that we're looking to develop our relationships with at present. So it's a very interesting market for us.
Thanks so much, Adam. Perhaps another question that I'll throw to both of you to answer, starting again with Dean first, is, and this has come from the chat, how do you see the adoption of tech compared to overseas? And what are the barriers to technology adoption that lags or is ahead of overseas? And so I think this is in reference again to sort of the use case in Australia.
Yeah, look, I'll reflect on my time in the industry, right? I spent 11 years at Microsoft and interacted with organizations of all different shapes and sizes, and at Dropbox and now at Monday, and so they touch all elements of the marketplace and companies of different sizes. I'd say Australia and New Zealand, I put in that category, sort of have to be externally focused in some respects. So some industries are very much focused on, well, how do we go to the global stage, right? So how do we build partnerships and collaborations with companies overseas? So I think they're highly collaborative in nature. You know, I saw certainly in my time at Dropbox and at Mondays, you look at the collaboration networks that are established within our platforms, and they significantly higher than other countries. So there's a high degree of that collaboration. I think also the way some Australian companies work and really leveraging the region, right? So remote workforces, you know, I've done work with companies like Kmart, where there's significant design teams based in India, and they've got big teams in India, and they're doing work in China for manufacturing. You know, there's other companies that will have, you know, Canva as an example, very large teams in the Philippines. So again, even just within the region, sort of high degrees of collaboration because of distributed workforces outside of the country. And I think that's where Australia certainly leads. Where do they lag? I think in certain industries, Australia can be very conservative, right? So in terms of, again, it's great at my time at Microsoft. It was like Australian companies would stay within that Microsoft platform, and they would be quite conservative in terms of looking outside of that. And so what we see in other markets is much more of a best of breed approach to adopting technology, certainly in the US. But in Australia, you see a lot more best of suite. You see companies really sort of almost being forced or really just focused on, well, you know, if it's in that suite, we're going to adopt and we're going to use that. And that isn't always the best outcome in terms of what they're trying to get done. So they limit themselves a little bit on that front.
Thanks, Dean. Adam, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give a boots on the ground perspective of Australia as much as I'd like to, but I will say that I think never before has the role of the kind of chief innovation officer and digital transformation departments been so pivotal into kind of helping larger organizations who may be somewhat slow to adopt or adapt to new technology take the forefront, I think. So these roles now are probably more important than ever.
Wonderful. And perhaps just final question in maybe one sentence. How do you both view the requirement and exciting area of idea capture for modern organisations? Dean, we'll go with you again first.
Idea capture for modern organizations. So I'm sort of interpreting this as how do you foster innovation from internally. You know, just in my own experience, I see what we see with companies running innovation projects. They'll use Monday. They've got a form in Monday. They publish that on their SharePoint site or their intranet, and it allows employees to then just put ideas into that form. That has a board where they have all of these innovation idea requests coming through, and then you normally have a committee of people reviewing these ideas and then sort of project managing them in a classic way around, well, what are we going to approve and fund and move forward with. That's in a Monday view of the world. You know, I've personally run sessions with our teams where we would use something like Miro, and we'd do brainstorming on a Miro, and it's been a great platform to, again, bring remote teams together virtually and sort of to drive the innovation that way. So that's probably more like, you know, internal company innovation, if I answer it from that perspective.
Yeah, that's an awesome answer. Thanks, Dean. Adam, anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. We like this question at Powtoon here, and I think that more generally speaking, there's some onus on management today to really cultivate an inclusive culture in the organization that brings out the best from their employees and that encourages them to experiment and to take risks and to be more creative. That could be using video tools like Powtoons and letting people you know, explore their creativity to create content. I mentioned earlier, you know, like peer-to-peer learning, you know, and getting insights from people at all levels of the company as to what they're picking up on the ground, so to speak. But it doesn't have to just be video. And, you know, Dean mentioned some other interesting platforms for idea sharing, and also platforms like Monday.com for project management. So just creating and fostering that culture of inclusion and making employees feel that their creativity is welcomed is a good starting place.
And that's a wonderful place to end this webinar. So big thanks to Adam and Dean for your fantastic presentations, responses to questions, and really strong insights on the topic of visual collaboration. And, you know, from my perspective, as we start to adapt to a new normal, it's great to see how innovations like Monday.com and Powtoon help us be, I guess, more productive and also better connect with our teams. So it's really fantastic. And, you know, just finally, love to thank the AIIA and IACC for setting up such an informative and wonderful session. So over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, everyone. And again, just want to reiterate our thanks, first of all, to our moderator, Irit. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think a privilege for us to be able to hear the insights from what you've been seeing at the forefront of a company that's really been leading the way. I wanted to say thank you also to Adam and to Dean, our speakers, and of course, thank you also to the AIIA for the partnership as well. We hope all of you over on the East Coast in Australia are enjoying the freedoms, and to those our friends on the West Coast, we hope that, you know, things will open up soon, and hope everybody stays well, and we will be back with some more webinars again soon. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.